Okay, so I am making this video because this is, I think, it helped me a lot. I was very confused with memorization in regards to what electrolyte imbalance does what. So I found, last night I was like desperate, and so I went online, and simplenursing.com, short videos, basically kind of the same thing. They go a little bit more in depth, which is good, but this is something to kind of help you remember what goes on with these imbalances. So keep in mind that how I am going about this is just the signs and symptoms of, so like what you're gonna see in the patient. You still need to know the causes, and basically any signs and symptom is also gonna fall hand in hand with interventions. So basically what I'm doing is just, you're gonna start, this is how you recognize the electrolyte imbalance, okay? Which is important for NCLEX because they ask, you know, what is a symptom of hypernatremia? And then you have to pick it. So this will help you a lot. So basically, for sodium's the first one that I have here. We know the ranges is between 135 and 145. This is important to maintain blood pressure, blood volume, maintain fluid imbalance, and regulated by aldosterone. Now, how I decide, or how I have chosen to remember sodium is how I view an overload of salt. Like, you're salty, like you have a big attitude, you're salty, you're hypernatremic. So if I'm salty, if I have a bad attitude, I'm gonna be hot because I'm angry, right? I'm gonna have a fever. I'm gonna be agitated because I have an attitude, right? Since I'm holding on to a bunch of things, like a bunch of salt, like I'm gonna be bloated. Like I'm not gonna feel my best, I'm gonna be bloated. And I'm gonna have dry mouth because I've been running my mouth because I have a big attitude, right? And then for hyponatremia, I like to think of it like this. Okay, what's a woman without an attitude every now and then, right? So a woman without an attitude, let's just say she's a weak woman. So with a weak woman or a weak person, like they're gonna be like weak and shaky, like they don't have an attitude, they're just kind of like, they're weak. And so you're gonna have seizures, you're gonna have abdominal cramping, you're gonna have low blood pressure and low bowel sounds because it's you know, nothing's bothering you, you're just going with whatever, and so everything is like weak and low. So for potassium, we know that potassium is important for heart and muscle function, for nerve impulses, and for muscle contractions. And how I like to remember potassium is K+. So let's call potassium king, the king of contraction. That's what I'm gonna call him, okay? So if you are hyperkalemic, you have a lot of potassium, you have an overload of it, and so you're gonna be really tight and contracted. And so when something's very hard and contracted, it's gonna slow down because I can't move that much. If I were like this really hard, like I can't move. And so that's how your heart and your accessory muscles respond to a influx of potassium. So if my heart is regular and it's not beating right, it's gonna be slow. Your heart rate's gonna be slow. Your blood pressure's gonna be slow. Any accessory muscles that help you breathe, that means your respiratory is gonna be slow as well. So just think of it as tight and contracted. When you're tight and contracted, your muscles are gonna feel weak because, like I say, you work out. The next day you're gonna be sore. So that's how I like to remember hyperkalemia. So if we don't have enough potassium, then we're going to be hypokalemic, which I like to say it's going to be low and slow, because a nation without a king is just going to be lower and slower. So any imbalance with potassium, whether it be high or low, everything is pretty much going to slow down. However, the difference I think is important, that for hyperkalemia, your GI tract is also going to be contracted, and that's going to cause diarrhea. However, for hypokalemia, you're still going to have that low blood pressure, that low heart rate. Your bowel sounds are going to be decreased, so you might have constipation. You're going to have diminished breath sounds. Your pulse is going to be irregular and thready. So that's how I like to remember potassium. So calcium, calcium is very important because it affects our bones, our heartbeats, and clotting factors. How I like to remember calcium is I see it as the law. It's like the police, okay? And it's funny because the range is 911, which is funny. So if you have hypocalcemia, that means the law's not around. Where's the law at? So when the law's not around, you're gonna act like a plumb fool, right? You're just gonna act crazy. So your heart is failing, you're partying, and you're gonna have a positive Trousseau sign and a positive Schwastek sign, which basically, I like to call that the funny dance. So when the law's not around, I'm gonna dance funny. Schwastek basically means you have an arm spasm with a blood pressure cuff. Schwastek is like when somebody brushes against your face and you smile, right? I call that the funny dance because the police isn't around and I'm having fun. So if I have less calcium, then that also means I have a higher chance of bleeding. So you can say, okay, well, if the law isn't around, I get shot or I get hurt, I'm probably gonna bleed out because I can't call anybody to help me. So you're gonna have a higher risk of bleeding. Your GI system's also going wild and crazy. You're gonna have diarrhea. So then when the law is around, so you have hypercalcemia, everything's gonna be slow. You're gonna be looking over your shoulder like, okay, let me behave, or let me settle down. So when there's an influx of calcium, in our body, the heart rate's gonna be slow and swollen. Respiratory rate's gonna be slow. Blood pressure's gonna be slow. You might have kidney stones because there's a buildup of calcium in your body. And I want to say this too, be sure to look at causes too. This is just to help you recognize the signs and symptoms. So last one, I believe, magnesium. I like to view magnesium as like the chill electrolyte. This is like the hippie, as I like to call it. So when you don't have that chill energy, that chill vibe, you're hypomagnesemia. I don't know how to say that word, okay? It's really hard. So when you don't have that chill electrolyte in your body, muscles go wild. Like you're just buck wild. So your heart rate's gonna be up. Your respiratory is gonna be up. You're gonna have difficulty breathing. You're gonna have diarrhea. It's just not gonna be good, because you're just not chill, right? But if you have too much of that chill electrolyte, your blood pressure is gonna be low. Your respiratory rate's gonna be low. Your heart rate's gonna be low. You're gonna have hypoactive bowel sounds, which could cause constipation. And if it's really bad, you're gonna go into a coma. So that's basically it. Under 9 minutes. I'm so sorry it was that long. I hope that this message sends. So yeah, that works for me. I think it might work for most people, but yeah, be sure to look at causes and interventions on their own, but signs and symptoms, very important too. All right, bye-bye.